So again, let's go ahead and dive in. Before we go forward, let's look back. Back in the earlier part of chapter 4, we saw Boaz going up to the gate, and he is preparing for court. So he went up, and then he sat down, and then the kinsman redeemer just happened to walk by, and Boaz is like, the man of the hour, perfect, come sit down. And then he went and gathered all the people that he needed, got them in place, so the court is set. Great, here we go. And Boaz presents the initial offer. Hey, this land needs to be redeemed. Naomi's involved, but you can redeem the land. You can redeem it. And the guy says, sounds great, it's a deal. And of course our hearts sank. But then Boaz brings about the caveat, and Ruth. And so the guy goes, I can't and I won't. You redeem it. That's where we left off. So we're going to go ahead and dive in to chapter 4, verse 17. You can either follow along on the screen in my colorful fashion, or if you still have your Bible out, you can follow along there. Now, this is the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. And this is the manner of attesting in Israel. So, when the Redeemer said to Boaz, buy it for yourself, he drew off his sandal. All right, so let's start at the very top here. Right away, we see that this is not sort of the continuation of the script. This is the narrator sort of jumping in and like adding a little editor's note here. So he says, now, this was the custom in former times. He has to explain what's going on. Remember back in the beginning where we said, hey, we don't know precisely when Ruth occurred. It was somewhere in this general time frame before this and after this, but not exactly. And we also don't know when Ruth was written down, when this whole narration was compiled. Well, a clue that we have from here is that it was some time from when the actual events occurred. Why? He has to explain this custom. The people that he's writing for don't know what this is, or he's thinking that they're not going to know what this is. So he has to write it out and say, hey, so you guys aren't going to know what's going on here. I need to explain it so that you guys know what's going on. So there's at least somewhat of a time gap here. Next, notice that this is a custom. Now we're going to talk about in a moment. So this is a manner of redeeming and exchanging to confirm a transaction. What is this not? This is not linked to, remember we've been talking about the levirate marriage and how this was the thing. If you're a dude, you married this girl, no, not this guy. Slip of the tongue. Right? We got many problems. Marries a girl, he dies, the brother is obligated, if he's able, to go ahead and marry the widow, so that she can produce children for the original guy who died, so that the line can be carried on. If the brother refused to do that, the law said you got to pull off the shoe, spit on his face, so that it's a sign of humiliation and shame for this guy. Now, that's a separate thing. That's in the law. This is just a custom. This is about a transaction. These are not equated in this whole situation. So whenever we're going through, again, initially, I know I have come into the story thinking, well, this nameless Redeemer, he's dirt of the earth, and, blah. But again, we're not casting him in as negative a light as at least I have previously seen him. So this is really all about just confirming a transaction, not about the whole shameful thing, pulling off the sandal. This is something different. So again, he's explaining this is the custom in former times concerning redeeming and exchanging. To confirm a transaction, the one drew off his sandal and gave it to the other. Definitely a little bit bizarre. I'm so glad we don't do this today, right? You're like, you can maybe just hold on to it, maybe just wave it in the air, So this is a symbol. This is, hey, I am not going to keep this land. Many commentators think that it's because the person who has the ability to tread or walk on the land has the right to it. And so giving the sandal was sort of signifying you have the right to walk on the land. And so that was sort of the idea behind the handing over of the sandal. Now, some commentators did suggest that whenever the sandal was handed over, that Boaz would have kept the sandal.
Yeah, the other guy had to take his shoe off and go home barefoot.
And then go and find a shoemaker and get another one. I don't go for that just because it's symbolic. It's symbolic, that's right. So, and again, just shoes were very valuable in this. Everything that you owned was very, very valuable because it took a very long time to make. And the materials were very expensive. And so everything about him keeping it was just sort of weird. It's more likely that he gave it back then. This is sort of like the legal stamp of paperwork. We've got the witnesses. They're the ones who are going to attest if there's any sort of conflict with people, somebody saying, hey, what's going on here? Why does Boaz have this land? They're the ones who are going to be able to say, hey, no, I was there, I saw it. Boaz is not going to whip out this sandal and say, no, I've got his shoe, see? It's his, I promise, it belongs to the nameless Redeemer. Now, some people, again, some commentators did think that, so if you're like, no, I really think that he kept the sandal, that's okay. I personally don't think that, but if you're like, no, he kept the sandal, I'm not going to have knockdown, drag out with that.
I say he kept it, and he framed it on the wall.
The other guy had to take his shoe off.
So again, if that's the way your brain's going, you can have him keep the sandal in your brain. That's cool. I will have him not keep it in mine. It's all good. So again, this is the manner of attesting. This is just the sort of seal, the whatever. Here we go. This is the final oorah. So why does the narrator even include this? Because to me, I'm like, well, why? You could have just skipped the handing over of the sandal thing and just had the guy say, you redeem it yourself, and then the witnesses chime in and say, okay, we're witnesses. Why include this whole thing? And I think the emphasis is that the narrator wants us to realize how legally in place this was. Everything is, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, as proper as it could be. This happened. So again, he's showing Boaz is doing things in accordance with the law, in accordance with the customs. He's an honorable man. He's doing everything A-okay. So that's what's sort of going on in these verses. Any questions, major questions on this? Well, let's slide forward. Hail the conquering hero. Woohoo! So, then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and to Mahlon. Also, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. So Boaz here is sort of giving a commentary speech. He's saying, hey, this is my motivation for all this. This is what I want to happen. You guys are witnesses, inviting the legal sort of what their response is going to be, which we're going to look at in a second. And he's sort of, again, giving this big summary statement here. So first of all, he says, you are witnesses. Who does he say this to? The elders and all the people. These are two different words. So the elders are all of the legal people that he had come and sit down to observe the events. It seems that these events drew a crowd. People are walking by and it's like, oh, what's going on? Oh, I want in on this. Oh, is this about Ruth and Naomi? Oh my gosh. And so there are all these people who are surrounding, and they now want to know what's gonna happen. So Boaz says not only to the legal representatives, but everybody else who's standing around, you are all witnesses. All of you can attest to what's going on here. Notice, too, the repetition of this day or today at the front and at the bottom. Remember earlier when we said, Naomi said to Ruth, hey, Boaz is going to take care of this today. Boaz said to Ruth, hey, remain tonight, but in the morning, we're going to get this resolved as fast as possible. We're going to make things happen. And the Lord brought about that nameless Redeemer just in the nick of time. Beautiful. He's saying, hey, this day, we got it done. We got it done. So let's continue forward. Witnesses this day. What? That I have bought from the hand of Naomi. What? Wait. From the hand of Naomi? I thought it was Ruth. Wait, Ruth and Naomi. So obviously the emphasis is on Naomi. She's the one who's the older widow. She's the one who is an Israelite. And so although sort of technically there was probably some control of the land that would have been granted to Ruth also, since she was the wife of the dead as well, the emphasis here is on Naomi. Boaz is doing the transaction with Naomi. Ruth is sort of the messenger, the in-between. Naomi's the one who's orchestrating all of this. So the emphasis is there. We could go deep into, so wait, what are the land rights things again? We're going to hold off on that discussion for like next year because Kinsman Redeemer, man, and Israelite laws about the land. Guys, so many hours. Anyway, so what did he buy? All that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Kilian and to Mahlon. So the phrase all that belonged confused me a little bit because I was like, well, I thought that this was land. Is this not land? Is this like, was there more attached to this? No, it's land. And so it's all the land that belonged to Elimelech is the sort of in parentheses phrase that you're not getting here, but it's all the land that belonged to Elimelech, all the land inheritance. And then I was like, wait, are there multiple sections of land? Because they're saying all that belonged to Elimelech and Kilian and Mahlon? Like, what's going on here? Nope, it's just one chunk of land. But the author's just differentiating, hey, we started off the one who originally owned the land, and then the inheritance would have passed to Mahlon and Kilian. And so this is just typical parallelism, a structure that would have been used at the time, where they sort of emphasize things a little bit more. It's Elimelech's land, which is also Mahlon and Kilian's land. These are just the people who were involved in the situation. What they would have had, Boaz is redeeming it. And then we have Ruth mentioned, but before we talk about this whole thing, I want to pause and say, who is not mentioned here? What member of this family isn't mentioned? There's only one.
Orpah. Yeah.
It's Orpah. That's right. And remember how we said the nameless redeemer made an expected decision for his own, he was willing to be a little bit gracious. Similarly, Orpah was initially willing to follow Naomi, but both of them, when it took the step of extraordinary faith, they turned back. And so again, it's not that Orpah's bad, it's just that she's being used as a foil to Ruth. And so she fades from the story because she is no longer relevant to what the story is really about, which is faith and about the line of David. And so she's just not mentioned. She went back. She's in Moab, maybe married somewhere else. Who knows? But she is no longer relevant to the story. Whew. So, also, Ruth the Moabite, widow of Mahlon. Notice this is the first time we learn which son she was married to. Probably the older one, based on the order that they were originally mentioned in the passage. We don't know for sure, but probably the older. So Ruth the Moabite, notice again, Callie mentioned, pointed this out as well, that Boaz is not ashamed of her heritage. It's possible that it did need to be mentioned for legal matters, like the full name needed to be mentioned. It's possible. Somebody this morning mentioned that the widow of Mahlon was important because you would need to, like there aren't last names in this culture, you are identified by who you're related to. So, hey, it's Ben, the son of Earl, the son of, So that's how people knew who you were. So it is possible that for legal reasons he includes all of this. But we know that Boaz is like, no. You came over, you hid yourself under the wings of the Almighty. He is sold on Ruth, and so he's like, yeah, Ruth Moabite. Yeah, she's great. It's awesome. So, Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife. A couple of us, while we're walking around, we're like, but there's a little bit of feminism in me. That did sort of, the hackles rose a little bit. And I was like, excuse me, what's going on here? I have bought to be my wife? I mean, I realize this is not the 21st century, but really, Boaz? So, the key to understanding this is in the word bought. Bought is a bad translation. The meaning of the word is acquired. So both of these are that I've acquired from the hand of Naomi, that I've acquired to be my wife. And this is just legal terminology. And it's, hey, in this legal transaction, in this legal process, I acquired land and I acquired Ruth. And it's interesting, too, in my mind, I'm like, why did he even mention the land? He doesn't care about the land. He cares about Ruth. He cares about Naomi. He cares about the line, as we're going to see down here. Why even bother talking about the land? It's because it's in the legal process of redemption that he legally acquires the right, not just the option, but the right in the eyes of the customs to be able to marry Ruth. And so this is all linked together. Again, you have no idea the amount of hackles that were raised whenever I was like, yeah, I'm about to be my wife. But it's just acquired, just part of the whole process here.
It's the Redeemer.
It's the Redeemer, that's right. So, as we continue on here, so we see I bought to be my wife. Now, in this section, Boaz is going to go ahead and dive into his motivations for why, in fact, did he do this. We already sort of suspect, but now he really goes deep. So, first of all, he says, I have bought to be my wife. I have acquired to be my wife. With that line, it seems like he sort of got his, he's like, it's all about me. I got a wife. This is great. I like Ruth. She's young. I'm going to have kids. Woohoo. It's all about me. But, we can read, so we can see the rest of the passage that it immediately shifts away from him to Elimelech, Mahlon, and Chilion. So let's continue on here and reread these verses. To perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers, from the gate of his native place. So again, the dead are these three right here, Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. And so Boaz's goal is to perpetuate their name. For Ruth to have sons, or primarily a son, and for that son to carry on Elimelech and Mahlon's name. Chilion, sorry, Chilion, you're just forgotten to history as well. We remember you in scripture, but otherwise, your name's not getting carried on. So if Orpah, that's a table. All good. If Orpah had come back, would the story have been different? Who knows? I don't know. Would we have had multiple awesome people throughout Scripture? Maybe. But she didn't. So it's just Mahlon and Elimelech, ultimately, that Boaz is thinking about. Their family name is going to be carried on. Remember that in this time, your name being passed on, that was your legacy. That was everything. Another interesting belief that they had in this time is that if people forgot you, if people no longer spoke your name, you essentially passed out of existence. Now, they did have thoughts about the afterlife as well, but it's sort of weird and sort of disconnected. And so basically, if you were no longer talked about, what did it matter anymore? And so for them to be able to continue to talk about Elimelech, for that name to be brought on in remembrance, was super huge. So, perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, and that's linked in with the land as well. Land and the line, both of those are sort of included in inheritance. And these next two phrases, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brothers and from the gate of his native place, this is again talking about that idea of legacy, that idea of his memory being carried forward. From among his brothers is basically that he's not being forgotten amongst family, friends, the kid down the street. They're going to remember the name of Elimelech. From the gate of his native place, so his native place is Bethlehem, right? But the gate, remember, that's where the legal things happen. That's where the people of the town would gather and all the important things would happen. So Elimelech is still going to be able to be represented in those legal matters. His name is going to be carried on even in the legal places, and that's Boaz's intention. That's where Boaz's heart is. Now, we can have the discussions about, well, did Boaz really, really like Ruth, or did he just like Ruth, But that's possible, the level to which they were drawn to each other is very possible. But the heart of the story, and the heart right here, is that Boaz is concerned for his family, for Elimelech, for Naomi, for that name to be passed on. And this is, again, at the cost of his own name. So if, let's say, Ruth only has one kid, that kid goes to Elimelech, his name, and Boaz would then pass into obscurity. Now, again, we have the question, was Boaz previously married? Did he have other kids? Scripture just doesn't say. In the next verses, we're going to take a look and see. I don't think so, but it's up for debate. So, this is the whole idea here. Boaz is emphasizing, perpetuate the name of the dead. This is his heartbeat here. let's continue forward. So this is Boaz's summary. He's saying, you are witnesses. Okay, now the people respond. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. Okay, so let's start again at the top. Not just the formal legal representation, but all the people who gather there, the whole crowd, they all respond, we are witnesses. And this is the appropriate legal response of the time. This is, again, along with the sandal, the sort of final stamp of approval, the final document to be signed of the day. This is sort of the legal equivalent. We are witnesses. They could have stopped right there. That would have been the end. But they don't. They launch right into a blessing. Clearly, Boaz, we know, has a great name. We know that Ruth has a great name because Boaz told Ruth, hey, all the people of the gate know you're a worthy woman. And I think that Naomi probably had engendered some sympathy at this point as well, because we've seen her transformation over the book of Ruth, where she came back all bitter. And then all of a sudden, here she starts to change. Her heart starts to warm, and she's all of a sudden very, very concerned about other people instead of completely focused inward on herself. Her faith has grown. So I think that everybody at the gate here is, again, just super interested in everybody's welfare in this story. They're really hoping for a little bit of a fairy tale ending, and we're going to get a little bit of a fairy tale ending because, every once in a while it works out like that. So let's go ahead and take a look at their blessing. First of all, may the Lord make, and again, the Lord will give you. They right away invoke the name of Yahweh. They're inviting God to step in. We're going to see in the next couple of verses that he does indeed step in. But they're recognizing that, again, in this time of the judges, where so many people are doing just what is right in their own eyes, the people of this town are interested in inviting the Lord into the situation. So, what are they asking the Lord to do? Make the woman who is coming into your house. Hold up. Why don't they just say Ruth? Would it be so bad to say her name? Really? But, so, this phrase, the woman who's coming to your house, is a typical phrase at the time that's used for a bride. So, make your bride. Is this essentially the equivalent? Because of the whole custom, they would go and they would get the bride and carry her through the threshold. This is not a good spot for this.
Thank you.
There's a lid on it, it's fine. So, I do it all for you. All for you.
Thank you so much.
So this is not, again, for the time, this is a normal phrase. So, make Ruth like what? So we have two comparisons here. We're going to address these two comparisons first. And there's a lot wrapped into these two comparisons. So buckle your seatbelts, here we go. First of all, like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. If you guys were in one of our, we've done a couple former studies where we've talked about Rachel and Leah. They were, of course, married to Jacob. Yes, I had trouble this morning too. I was like, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph? No. So Rachel and Leah married to Jacob. He had 4 wives, remember, so Rachel and Leah, and then 2 maidservants, who were the maidservants of Rachel and Leah. Which woman was married to Jacob first? Shout it out. Leah. Yep. He wanted Rachel, but he got Leah first. So Leah is the first in preeminence. We don't have the maidservants mentioned. They're not important. So to us, they are important. We recognize their importance and their value. But in the Israelite history, in their customs, so the proper wives were the ones that they named, that they remembered. They're the matriarchs, the important ones. So they named Rachel and Leah. We will remember the maidservants, but not in this passage. So Rachel and Leah. Notice the reversal here. Rachel and Leah. Now, of course, they both are, they both had kids, and they both, again, built up the house of Israel. Literally, the house of Israel is, the children of Israel, the nation of Israel. Were it not for these women, would there be a nation of Israel? No. Literally, they had the 12 kids who were Joseph, but anyway, who became the 12 tribes of Israel. They are the ones who's got this whole thing started with the whole nation building thing. So they're the ones who had all the children. Rachel is being highlighted here. What was significant? I mean, there were lots of things that were significant and a little bit wrong about Rachel. But what's the sort of important thing, thinking about having children, what was Rachel's deal? She couldn't have any. She was barren, right? And what happened? The Lord remembered Rachel and opened her womb. Similarly, Ruth had been married to Mahlon for over 10 years and was barren. Okay, so we have this really interesting comparison where they're praying that the Lord will open up her womb, just like he did for Rachel. Also that, there will be kids, have the children, build up the house of Israel. But also think too, so Rachel and Leah, like we mentioned, are matriarchs. They're not just like, Israelites. They're highly esteemed. These witnesses are praying that Ruth will not just be included into the congregation of Israel, but that she will actually be elevated to the same level as Rachel and Leah. And of course, we're like, oh, she did. Yay! Yay! Right? So this is their prayer, all right? So that's the first comparison. Again, a lot up in that. Let's take a look at this last one before we hit these verses here. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring that the Lord will give you by this young woman. So,
What's a Tamar?
So let's talk about these characters here. So Judah, one of the sons of Rachel and Leah's fourthborn. And if you remember the story, Judah had 3 sons. He married the first one to Tamar. The first son was wicked, so he died. So there was a Levirate marriage here. His younger brother did, in fact, marry Tamar, but he was wicked too. So the Lord struck him down. Don't have wicked. This is the moral of the story. No. So then Judah had one more son. He's only got one left, right? And was he wicked too? We don't know. But Judah's a little bit concerned, and he's like, I don't know if it's something about this woman, or I don't know. So he holds that last son back, and he doesn't give him to Tamar in marriage. So Tamar's sitting around going, I got a biological time clock going down here. Now, it's interesting. What she doesn't do is she doesn't go back to her people like Orpah does. She sticks around. So she's interested in, we credit her with some type of faith, some type of interest in the nation of Israel. How much? We don't know. But she did stick around, so we can at least credit her with that. But the method that she went about to produce these children is, shall we say, frowned upon. She dresses up like a prostitute, sets herself up on the side of the road where she knows that Judah's going to come by, apparently knowing that her father-in-law is not the greatest person. And sure enough, Judah comes by. He's like, oh, prostitute, great! And so, because his wife had died. And so he's like, let's do this thing. So they have sex. She gets pregnant. He goes to have her stoned because he's like, oh, you immoral little person. When he's just as guilty. And she's like, oh, I've got proof that it's you. Oh, awkward. And so he's like, you're more righteous than I am. Go ahead, have your baby. And we're not going to do this again. So it's a really awkward situation, right? This is a really weird situation. But she has Perez, and Perez is an ancestor to Boaz and lots of other people who would have settled in the region of Bethlehem. So this is an important character for the people of Bethlehem. Notice this distinction here. May the Lord make the woman, like Rachel and Leah, change. May your house be like the house of Perez. What they are not doing is asking the Lord to make Ruth like Tamar. Because they're like, Ruth has been honorable. Ruth has been praiseworthy. Now, there are similarities between their stories. They both ended up with older men. They both were initially without children. There are Levirate marriages involved in both situations. But there is a clear distinction that Tamar's conduct is not what they're looking for here. But Ruth, again, has been highlighted as being honorable this whole time. And so what they're asking for is, may your descendants, may your house, and again, that's the idea of the house, descendants, be numerous, be respectable, be great, just like we are here. But, like these people, like Boaz, like the very man that she's marrying. This whole house idea is important. And again, that the Lord will give you by this young woman. And so we have, again, this great word young, describing who? Ruth. Who is not young, Boaz. So again, we have this sort of emphasis again throughout the story that these other people are young and Boaz isn't so young, but guys can have kids until they're like 102, so it's not a big deal. But Ruth is young, and she has the ability, the possibility, at least, within our eyes, within our human eyes. But remember, we know lots of women in Scripture, lots of women, who are like way past the age of childbearing. But in these people's eyes, they're like, hey, she's a young woman. There's hope in this situation. So, these are the two comparisons building up to this central main point. May you act worthily in Ephrathah and be renowned in Bethlehem. Remember, Ephrathah was the sort of like suburbs of Bethlehem, Bethlehem city proper. This is a typical sort of parallelism. First line says something, the second line builds upon it and intensifies it. So, may you act worthily. We've seen this word before, a couple of times now. Describes Boaz back in chapter 2. Boaz is a mighty man, a worthy man, a wealthy man. We said the key idea there is that idea of worthiness, of honorable. And then Boaz again uses the same word to describe Ruth whenever he's blessing her. All of the people of the town, the people of the gate, know that you are a worthy woman. You have been honorable. You have been praiseworthy. And so they're saying, hey, may you and your descendants be praiseworthy, honorable. May your reputation be high. May it be lifted up. And may you be renowned in Bethlehem. Now, this is a really cool word. Renowned is literally basically to call out. May your name be called out. May it reverberate through the streets. May everybody hear it. So this is really interesting, right? Because what are they asking for? They're asking that Boaz be remembered. They're asking for Boaz's name to be known. This is the very opposite of what Boaz has just stated that his intention is, which is kind of interesting, right? He's like, look, Elimelech, Mahlon, I want their name to go on. I want them to be remembered. And now the witnesses are like, that's nice, Boaz. But, oh, Lord, may Boaz be just Boaz, he's great. May we know Boaz's name. May he be honored because of what he's done, what these characters have all done together. May their faith be honored. May they be lifted up. Now, what's really cool is that everybody's hopes, everybody's intentions, everybody's prayers get answered. Because, well, we know the story, right? We know that Boaz is going to have descendants, and we know his name. We know he's in the line of King David and Jesus, and we're like, Boaz, he's awesome. He's an ancestor. Well, he's in this lineage. He's great. We just love Boaz. But who's that very first character that we learned about in the story? Very first guy whose name gets mentioned? Elimelech. We know his name too. I know. And it's really cool because whenever we look at Elimelech, his faith is not great. It's kind of shaky. He bails, right? There's probably a certain amount of, he's trying to do what's best for his family, but he abandons the land. He runs. But God is gracious. And he says, we will remember you. We will honor Boaz's heart and say, Boaz, your intention was that Elimelech be remembered. And so we will. But God has a way of flipping all those tables, reversing all the roles. And so Boaz is the one who, as we will see, gets named in the genealogy, which is super cool. It's so cool. So that's sort of the essence of this slide. Let's push forward to the close. So Boaz took Ruth. She became his wife, and he went into her. The Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Guys, this is sort of almost to the end of the grand story. This is, you're looking at, you're like, this is the finale. As we're gonna see next week, it's not quite. There's one more big whammy. That's gonna be the real finale. But it's sort of simple. Like, there's not gonna be a ton of explaining here. Boaz married Ruth. We see her ascent, right? We remember back, she was a slave in the fields, working, pulling out all the stuff. She was a foreigner. Now she's family. She was, an outsider, and now she's a wife. She belongs. She has that connection. And again, she's risen through the ranks. She started off, she's like, I'm not even worthy to be called your servant. Like, you're treating me like one, and now she's wife. Yes! So she becomes his wife. He went into her. They had sex. The Lord gave her conception. This is so cool. This is the only the second time that the narrator directly says that the Lord intervenes in the story. He's hinted at it. He said, oh, behold. Oh, this just happened, right? It just happened. But this, in his eyes, is clear. Just like whenever the Lord ended the famine, brought bread back to Bethlehem, this too is clearly from the Lord. The one who is barren has miraculously conceived, and the son, the one, oh my goodness, it's a son. It's not even a daughter. Again, we are like, oh, it's a daughter. It's great. We love daughters. But in this time period, especially for Ruth and Naomi, Ruth is no longer a widow, but Boaz is older, so his timetable is not as long, probably as Ruth's. Whenever Boaz dies, now there's hope. The land stays in the family. The name continues. They're provided for not forever exactly, but for in their mind, what equates to forever, to the end of their lives, as much as can be hoped for. The security that we've been hoping for this entire time is here. We get to sort of sit and relish this whole event. We're just like, oh, it's a fairy tale ending, yeah. I do agree with Kelly. I mentioned, could we have gotten a little bit more? Just a little bit. We got Rachel and Leah. We got a story about them. No. This is what we get. Again, this seems like the grand finale, but next week, we're going to see the even more significance of this son and how the witnesses' other prayers did, in fact, get answered. But that's next week. So our homework is going to be inductive study. Take a personal, your own deep dive in, or just sort of a skim through. Even if you just read it through, that's good too. Ruth chapter 4, verses 14 through 17. Can't wait for 2 weeks from now whenever you guys get to do that genealogy. Oh, it'll be fun and exciting. Then in your books, we're going to be diving into the last session. That's session 6, due days 1 and 2. We'll come ready to discuss that. If you're like, my week is crazy, come. We love you. Come.